Attention, please. Are we ready for the next keynote?
Yeah.
I can't hear you. Okay, our next keynote is from Michael Stump, SAFe trainer and consultant. And Michael is going to speak about scaled agile framework. Please welcome Michael Stump.
Thank you very much. So team told us before, okay, everybody's tired already, so now you need to be asleep, right? But I hope I can wake you up just a little bit. Who of you has not heard about SAFe before today? Oh, before today. Okay, a couple of people, no idea about SAFe. And I think that's totally okay. And I have to congratulate you for being here, for spending your Sunday here at the conference and learning. Because learning is about play, what we heard in the morning. We need to learn, it's part of leadership. We need to move forward and we need to learn new stuff. And Tim mentioned the tree before, right? We want to go a little bit into the roots of Agile, and I want to give you some insights what's behind the framework, because the practices are visible. We've heard about the practices and some implementation details before, so I want to go a little bit into the roots and then also give you a little bit of history and outlook, what's going to happen. So basically, a couple of years ago, about 12 years ago, I was lying on a beach, vacation, enjoying the sun, and thinking a little bit, how will software development look like in about 10, 12 years, basically now? And I really, really believed that it's kind of drag and drop. We move modules together, we focus on business processes. Some of you believe that as well? Maybe, maybe not. But sometimes it feels more like this when we develop systems and software, right? So they have a big advantage compared to a lot of us in this room. What's the advantage they have? Sorry? Predictability? Collocation. How often do we have teams? I think we have a lucky organization with 117 people in one location. But in reality, we are distributed. It's just reality. So we have to deal with that. And we have to put some principles and practices in place which will help us. So when we go to organization, I have the pleasure to see a lot of large and small organizations, just going to visit a couple of CIOs in Amsterdam and Brussels tomorrow and the day after. And we always hear kind of the same topics. Which of these issues sound more or most familiar to you? Which one? Poor morale. Yeah? What else? Dependencies. Can't manage dependencies. If you only have one team, by the way, if you have a team of 5 to 9 people, Scrum team, don't scale. Doesn't make sense. It makes sense if you have several teams working together, because then you start to see more dependencies. And oftentimes this results in late delivery. That's the result we oftentimes see. Massive growing complexity. We've heard it before today in several talks. We move forward faster, but we have more systems. The systems need to work together. So we need to find ways. And if we have all these problems, this will lead or can lead to poor quality, poor morale. And this decreases productivity. We'll see more of that a little bit later. So one of my favorite statements from Edward Deming, it is not enough that management commits themselves to quality and productivity. They must know what it is they must do. Such a responsibility cannot be delegated. And I was thinking about that, and I'm flying a lot. Sometimes my luggage arrives, sometimes not, but whatever. And there are people reading newspaper. Anyone still reading newspapers on paper form instead of iPad? Yeah? Good. Does anyone like the format? By the way, I cannot read that, unfortunately, but the format is quite okay. Do you like the format of the newspaper? No. I hate it. Because what's happening when people behind me in the airplane pushing the newspapers into my back, And my favorites are, it's too small, but the bigger ones, turn the pages around, and the coffee is on my, yeah, you know. Or then you lose a page or whatever. So very, very challenging format, right? And nobody likes it. Maybe it's good to start a fire. I think that's an advantage. Do you know why we have this format?
Probably convenient to produce it.
Convenient to produce would have been my first guess as well. Anyone else? Historically. Why historically?
Probably it was fitting to something that's not used.
Very, very interesting story behind that. In the 1600s, sorry? Yeah. Sorry? That's a good, and big pictures, right? We need to show that as well. That's good. But the main reason is, in the 1600s, newspapers... Printed tables. Well, not really. Newspapers had the size of a paper book, 1600s. And then in 1712, government introduced a tax on the number of pages in a newspaper. Smart, right? Cool, we put the policy in place and we make bigger pages. Totally reasonable decision. And putting that policy in place, I would do that as well. I would do the same. So now what's interesting, that in 1855, this tax was discontinued. So the reason why we have this format is not available anymore. Did we change the format? Not really, to have usability. And if you transfer that now into your environment, who's working for a bank or supporting a bank? How many policies and standards do you have in a bank? A lot. One I've worked with, 1,500 policies and standards. And we need to know all of them, right? And follow them. And a big part of it is not current anymore. Who can change policies?
The management, the government.
Management, leaders. It's not a developer or a tester who can change the policy. So it's management who can question policies. And with that bank, we started to see, okay, we had all these review boards. Why do you ask the question? Oh, we always did it like this. We always ask the question, but there's no reason behind that. So we have started to remove some of the policies and standards because they haven't been current anymore. Do you think that changed the environment? Changed productivity, changed morale in an organization. And we heard this morning in Marco's talk about the MIT, right? The engineers are not as smart anymore as 2 decades ago, I think. That was the statement. So do we think that people are not as smart anymore? Or do we put in a curriculum which maybe doesn't support our environment? So maybe it's really the environment which matters, and the environment is set by leadership. So you cannot just change the people in the environment, you need to change the environment. You need to play, you need to do experiments, you need to innovate. And that's part of what's on here. So what do we need to do as leaders? So they need to understand lean, agile values and principles. Not just the framework. If you're implementing the framework here blind, just doing what's written on here, you will fail. You need to understand why we do certain things. You need to understand the principles and practices behind that to be successful. Implement practices, yes, we need it. And we need leadership. He mentioned it before. Without leadership support, I've never seen a successful transformation. And it's not just saying, yes, you need to do it. It's doing it, leading the way. Just off a workshop with an insurance company, I had 55 leaders in the room for 3 days. CIO and the business C-level with all their complete management team, 3 days. This initiated a huge change in that organization. So we talked a lot about principles and also about practices, of course. So when you look, you should be familiar with what you see on the right side, right? Agile values. By the way, yes, we need documentation. Also for developers, there is a need for documentation, but we need the right level. And we need to focus on working software. That's how we measure progress. also when we scale. We want to have continuous delivery, as Tim mentioned. In SAFe, we have organizations delivering to production every 8 minutes. We decouple, develop on cadence, and release on demand. It's a business decision, when do we release to production? So we need all the things on the right side. We want to focus on the things on the left. And there are great principles behind. Just if you haven't read it for some time, go back to the principles. Maybe that's an interesting read. And we have the lean part, which is the house of lean. The value, that's what we want to achieve. It's not introducing agile or SAFe. That cannot be the goal. The goal of an organization is to create value. And we have great tools like agile, lean, SAFe, which will help us to deliver that value. But my first question all the time going to the organization is, what do you want to achieve? What are the objectives? And implementing SAFe cannot be the objective. So we have a couple of pillars: respect for people and culture, flow. We've heard that this morning. Intrinsic motivation can create some flow. Innovation. We need to play. We need to be innovative. And also in Scrum, sometimes you have a sprint. What do you do after the second sprint? Next sprint, right? And next sprint. And next sprint. When do you innovate? Oftentimes we focus more on features, so we need to bring some structure back to help us to innovate and to play, to make experiments. So we want to focus on that one as well. And then we need relentless improvement. That's what I'm looking for when I'm leaving organization. Do they plan, do, check, act? Do they continuously improve? Because that's what we need to have. And it only works if we have leadership support. So all this compiled in 9 principles, which are kind of the underlying principles for SAFe, is what you see here. Take an economic view, apply systems thinking, assume variability, preserve options, build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles. We want to have feedback as fast as possible. Are milestones good or bad? Milestones are good. We need them. I think it's the question, how do you read milestones? But they help us to plan and to deliver. Visualize and limit work in process. So many organizations I see have too many initiatives in parallel, on a portfolio level, but also on a team level. Too much stuff in parallel. Reduce batch sizes, we'll come back, and we need to manage queue length. Cadence synchronization, we'll talk about that. And closing the loop to the morning session, unlocked intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers. They will have fun, they will come into a flow, and they will deliver more, and you get better performance. So this is the world we are living in. So how can we unlock that? And then one is, which is sometimes a little bit scary for leaders, it's decentralized decision making. It was scary for me. I was a project manager, and I had a fear to lose control. And a lot of Agile is about fear or change. People don't like to change because they don't understand. They have some fears. So we need to address that. This does not mean losing control. So taking a couple of deep dives, take an economic view, we have the time, we have the value delivery. In a traditional approach, we don't see anything, we don't see anything, and then we deliver value at the end, which is maybe a little bit different was initially expected. So what we try to do in Agile is, okay, we deliver a box, we get the feedback, we go from there, we learn. And maybe we can already create revenue here. So value, maybe we can have a part of our tool already out there. And we get feedback, and that's very, very valuable. Get feedback as often as possible. Talking about decentralized decision making and take an economic view. Often the organization does not know what the leadership team thinks about what is the right decision. So we need to establish a decision-making framework. So take an assumption, we have different factors which are influencing each other. We have cycle times, we have cost, we have development expenses, value, risks. All of this influences each other. But now if you are in an organization and you are building a product which has maybe a very short life cycle, 1 year, it's an app, very short life cycle. So you don't have to care a lot about the cost, the operation cost, maintenance cost, because there's not a lot of time where you do maintenance on this app. So maybe we can shortcut a little bit here on the development expenses to increase cycle time to create the value and not focus too much on that. And maybe we can take certain risks. Now assume you are building a system. I once worked for a company building ticket vending machines and ticketing systems for public transportation. And the life cycle is 20 plus years, which you have for these devices, hardware and software. So if you can reduce the maintenance and operation costs just a little bit, that's maybe a worthwhile development expense to spend a little bit more time, which influences the cycle time, but increases the overall value. And this is information which has to be communicated to the whole organization. How would leaders take decisions? And if everybody in the organization understands this kind of decision-making framework, they can make the right decisions. So I don't have to be everywhere and make all decisions myself. People start to think in a similar way and understand why we are taking certain decisions. So we need to put the decision-making framework in place. So we empower decision-making framework. I don't spend too much time on the other elements. Also, coming back to an element Tim mentioned, take a systems view on value delivery. Take a systems view, not a local optimization view. I've seen so many organizations, wonderful, great Scrum teams, individual Scrum teams, whenever it came to integration, everything fall down. So they were slow. And you can have a perfect agile Scrum team delivering a lot of value, much more than before, but if you don't have marketing and support organizations who can take this value and really put it to the people, you don't have overall value. So look at the value chain from the request, from the beginning, until it is deployed. And don't try to get faster at coding, testing. If I can test a little bit faster or code a little bit faster, doesn't help me a lot. I want to focus on the delays we have in between here. So for example, I have a request, the email is sent to the supervisor. Maybe a supervisor looks at it after 2 days. I already lost 2 days. So focus on the steps between the delays, and that's how you can optimize your time to market. Much, much more than developing and coding faster. So build incrementally out of a timing perspective, and because you're tired, I'm going faster over that. But one thing I want to mention is reducing batch size. Smaller batch size typically improves productivity. And large batch sizes increase variability. Variability means how long time does it take? Maybe if the road is empty, I can get pretty quickly to the airport, right? But if you have a lot of traffic, if you have a high utilization, it can be very long, so I have a big variability in there. And variability is more important for leaders and the business than productivity. It's the predictability. We say we can deliver then, and what do we deliver then? Oftentimes when I'm asking the questions to leaders, okay, what do you prefer, better productivity or better predictability? Of course, the standard answer is both. But if they have to choose, it's predictability. Because it's embarrassing to say, oh yeah, we believe we can deliver that, and we don't deliver it at that point of time. But they always want to have more productivity. Just reality, right? Focus on predictability. And we can increase predictability when we reduce utilization and when we reduce batch size. Very practical example. In SAFe, there is a session called PI planning, 2-day planning event, the whole team. Basically, this event is happening in one room. 50 to 125 people, which are typically on an agile release train, together in a room like this. They plan for 2 days, very, very structured approach. Amazing what is happening in there. The energy, you need to experience it. You will not believe just by hearing it. You really need to experience that. But something interesting happened. So there's a session in the morning where we do briefings. And then we do team breakouts, where team take features and break it down into stories. And in one organization, the team asked to go back from the big room where we did the briefings and go back into their team areas. And we said, let's try this. Same building, 3 different floors. I wanted to see what is happening. So something very interesting happened. So team 1 started to break down the features into stories, and they have identified a dependency on team 3, which was on the 3rd floor. So typically, if you're in one room, what you do, you just go over, we would have a discussion, what is the dependency, what do we do with that, and you go back. Dependency identified, not necessarily solved. So you go back. So what was happening now, in that team, they said, oh yeah, we have to walk up 3 stairs. Let's wait. Let's try if we find some other stories where we have dependencies on that team. So they started to make bigger batches. Then at the end, shortly before the end, they run up. Of course, the other team was busy, and they haven't been able to address that. So smaller batches are very important. And to be able to work with smaller batches, we need collocation or the right tools, and we need the right infrastructure when we deploy to production. So it's very, very important to see how can we reduce batch size. So whenever you can, reduce batch size and you typically get great results. So why are we talking about practices and principles? So in the SAFe trainings, Tim is doing that, and I had the pleasure to work with Tim before. We spend a lot of time on principles, especially at the beginning. It needs a combination between principles and practices. Practices alone don't work. Principles alone don't work. So we need to have the right combination, because when you do a transformation like this, this has a big impact. And you will probably adjust some of the practices. But to do that, you need to understand the principles behind to make the right decisions, to explain it, and to make the right decision. Can we have shorter sprints or not, or longer sprints? If you understand the principles and filter by the principles, you make the right decisions for success. That's why we spend so much time really also on the principles, and we train leaders on them. And then we go into the practices. And SAFe, the framework of practices, proven, integrated patterns for scaling agile in organizations. So everything what you find in here is used in several organizations. So all our learnings are going in there. And we are now at SAFe version 4. By the way, it doesn't mean that SAFe has 4 layers: team, program, value stream, portfolio. That's not related to this one. There is, basically I will show you 2-level SAFe, which is a spike at the moment, 3-level SAFe, and 4-level SAFe in SAFe 4.0. It's just our latest knowledge is available in here. But let's go back. 2011, first version. Challenge was, how can several teams work together? What do we need to do? Several teams, integration challenges, alignment they wanted to have. So not a lot on portfolio at that point of time. And we learned more, so optimization more on the program level. How do we do this PI planning? There's a lot of learnings in there. And then in version 3, we've seen that more and more organizations are running several of these ARTs, Agile Release Train. Team of agile teams, typically 5 to 12 people. Teams, 5 to 12 teams, 50 to 125 people. So there was a need for portfolio and also changing some of the budgeting mindset. Go away from traditional budgeting. And then we have seen organizations taking SAFe version 3.0 and apply it not only for software, also for building systems, cars, airplanes, and so on. And we developed a parallel framework which is called LSE. We did test trainings, and all the feedback was, doesn't make sense to have 2 different frameworks, so we should find a way to integrate that. We tested that with the community and with people. We had the biggest system integrators in training to define that. And we said, okay, yeah, makes sense. And we have integrated everything in version 4.0, but made that more modular and scalable. So basically, that's the minimal. If you want to call it safe, that's essential safe, 2-level safe. That's a spike, that's a development spike. You will not find it on the website yet. Maybe that's something which is in the new version. There's a blog post about that. So we still have to understand how is value flowing, and then we have typically one agile release train, and you see some of the elements are removed because we don't need it that way. That's the minimal thing. If you don't do inspect and adapt, you're not doing safe. If you don't do PI planning with all the people in the room, you don't do safe. These are kind of key elements we need to have. And then maybe, as Tim mentioned before, you need an additional level. You need a portfolio level. So we have team, program, portfolio. Portfolio typically when you have several agile release trains. And that's the start page when you go to the website. And most organizations are totally fine with this. Just the shocking element for some of you when you see the real big picture is what we have here, an additional level, value stream. So if you have one value stream where thousands of people are working together, you need additional coordination because the train is limited to about 125, Dunbar's number and some empirical evidence. So what can we do? And that's why we have integrated the additional level. Really for the largest organization, where a lot of people are building and working on one solution or one product. Don't use it if you don't need it. It's very easy to add complexity. It's very difficult to reduce complexity. Start simple. 90% of the cases start like this, one agile release train. Identify the value stream, start one agile release train. That's basically how do you roll it out in an organization. You start here, and then you base it on that. You make this one successful. I think that's a key element to do. So you see, it's basically modular. You take what you need, and there are organizations which use Boeing, several of these portfolios. Largest businesses, so they have several of these portfolios. Others, 4-level, 3-level, 2-level safe, whatever fits your organization. That's the framework. When you understand the practices and the principles, you know how to customize it the right way. So the core of SAFe is this agile release train, which is a group of people, they have a common mission, they have a common cadence, they have synchronization, and they have one backlog, they have a vision for the product they build, and a roadmap. They have guidance, and you see this kind of PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, adjust. We need that on all the different levels. We need regular integrations. So every 2 weeks, we have a system demo where the integration of all the teams need to be demonstrated. That's work in progress, working software. And we try to get the people from the leadership, business owners, to that system demo to see the progress so we can demonstrate what we have built, how we invested the money of the last 2 weeks. So we have a lot of transparency what's going on there, right? And we can see the progress. And one of the key things in the Agile Release Train is the PI planning, 2-day event. And we want to do a short experiment, and you need to trust me a little bit with that one. So let's assume we want to have a task as a group. We want to move that podium. Everybody's pulling on a string to move that one. And now look a little bit around the room, think how you came into the building. Just visualize that. And then close your eyes and point with your hand in the direction of east. Close your eyes, direction of east. You cannot be wrong. Some more hands, please. Please keep your hands up, open your eyes, and quickly look around the room. You see what's happening? Lots of initiatives, lots of different objectives, lots of goals. Everybody's pulling in a different direction. What is happening to this one? It's basically at the same place, or it's moving very slow in one direction. Did we have a clear specification? Pretty clear. By the way, I have no idea where East is here, so I have my brain extension, which would basically help me. But assume you are in one room, everybody together, and we agree, this is East for us. Everybody knows this is East, and now we are pulling on that podium. Imagine how much energy we can create with that. And imagine how often, if you develop software in the big systems, people don't know what the other teams are doing, walking in a different direction, have different objectives, redundant work which is happening. Oh, another team just did almost the same, or the module we did as well. We need to have this alignment, and that's what we get in here. Alignment is one of the core values of SAFe. But in here, we get a big part of this alignment together with all the teams. So, talking about implementation, train everybody, launch agile release trains. Train everybody, people need to have the knowledge, need to understand what's going to happen, take away fear, and we start with leadership. We need to train them. And factors why projects are failing, this one, people haven't been trained. Leaders haven't been trained and do not support it. So this is really a key factor, to train everybody, then launch the trains, and then you can get really some amazing results. Typically, I'm asking about what do you want to achieve? That's what I hear most often, time to market. We need to get better in that. We need to have better quality. That's what they say, but they can never answer me, or almost never answer me, how do they measure that? I always ask the question, you want to get better productivity, how do you measure it today? So maybe easier to measure is the engagement, morale. And if you have a high morale, you will automatically have higher productivity as well. Because people are motivated to do work, they typically do better quality work. They work more, they are maybe less on YouTube and Facebook because they are having fun. They automatically deliver more and increase productivity. So I'm sure if you want to read more about how companies implemented it, we are constantly updating case studies so you can get the feeling for the implementation. In organizations you can see what is achieved in there. So I don't want to spend too much details on that, then I have 1 minute left until 6 o'clock. So what I want to give you on the way, I hope it was a little bit inspiring. You need to understand principles and practices. You need to gain the knowledge if this is something which makes sense for you. And to understand if it makes sense for you in your context, you can gain the knowledge, you can read on the framework, you can click on it, there are trainings, and I hope this gives you a safe learning journey. Play, have fun, do a lot of experiments and innovation, and I'm looking forward to be here next year and hear a lot of the case studies, how you implemented it. Have fun.
Okay, so now we're ready for the questions. Please raise your hand if you got, okay.
And I hope you have asked all the difficult questions to Tim, because he's the first filter for me.
Okay, hello. Thank you
Hi.
for interesting presentation. I have two small questions, probably. So first one about the Scrum Master role. So we know that Scrum implementation, before even scaling, depends on the Scrum Master role. And it still is important when we talk about Scrum. So how important is the role in SAFe? And the other small question, comparing to less, what is better in SAFe, or what's the difference?
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's start with the second question first, because it's very hard for me to compare two frameworks. First, I've never been trained in less, and I've never experienced it. So I can talk about SAFe, I can show you what works and what doesn't work, but if I never experienced less, I don't know. There are a lot of people out there who can support you with that question. For us, it's important. We know that this works. We focus on how can we make that better, how can we learn and do that. Back to the first question, Scrum Master is a very, very essential role in SAFe as well. So basically it's just adding a little aspect of, you need to align with different Scrum Masters across the organizations. Because you are not an individual or an individual team, you cannot do completely everything. So maybe you want to align a little bit with other Scrum Masters, and you have a good understanding, okay, what's the enterprise thing? What do we want to do? A little bit of alignment can be very, very helpful. And it enriches basically the job of a Scrum Master. So I've seen that a lot, that people say, yeah, it's interesting, it's a different context, and it helps me to grow a team, but also a larger team. And it's really fascinating what you can achieve with 125 people together. If you create that energy, high-performing agile release train, it's extremely interesting what you get out of this. And the Scrum Master is essential to do that. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, today we heard a lot about SAFe, and I'm interested, is there any tools, like management tools, which support SAFe, or you still should go with many tools?
By tools, you mean really like Jira, Rally, or management tools?
Yeah.
There are a lot of tools who are out there you can use, you can support based on your needs, based on your requirements, you adjust that. So we don't have a standard set of tools in here, what we recommend. So there are some ideas, you can find some ideas on the framework as well. So really technical tools, but also practices how you do it. In the training, you, for example, find in the training, you find some tools how to decentralize decision making, which is typically a management tool which I give them when I do coaching and mentoring. So how to get away from some of the decisions, how decentralize some of the decisions which I don't have to do. So you find some tools in there, the technical tools. There's a lot of great stuff which is supporting that. You're welcome.
One more question here.
Michael, thank you. You briefly discussed before the question of productivity versus predictability. And yes, we want to have both. Your answer was like predictability is the one. But my question is why? I mean, what the point in the team if I know they tell me like, hey, we absolutely predictably not deliver this feature next year because we're not productive at all.
Okay.
Shouldn't just go for less predictability but more productive and fast-moving teams?
I think you are right. So it doesn't mean that if we want to be predictable, it doesn't mean we don't want to be productive. We always want to deliver as much as we can. And that's part of the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers. We need to trust the team and to hire the people because they like their work. We need to build the environment where they deliver as much as possible. And in my experience, I always had to kind of slow them down a little bit because they were overcommitting. So I never had a case where I had it on a team level where sometimes I had to push a little bit, which is good. But I think it's just the question of what is the main factor. And when you ask managers and leaders, I will mostly have tomorrow a discussion like this, and predictability is more important to them. It's the feedback I get in 95% of the cases. And that's why we focus on that one. But we focus on that one, on productivity, and when you go deeper into the framework, we have one key metric we have in the framework is predictability. But you can be above 100% or below 100%. And I don't want to have 100% predictability. I basically want to be in a range, 80 to 100%. But I also want to allow that they can do more. Because I want to see, okay, are they challenging their situation as well? And if I have a team which is always 100%, I know something is wrong.
Thank you. Questions? I think, yeah, we have one more.
My question is about design and innovation. So maybe you could describe in more details where this process in your framework. And so we know that innovation and design is a really iterative process and unpredictable. So how does it work in your framework? So where are all these cool guys as user experience designers, customer experience designers, user experience research designers, etc.?
So you don't want to tell me that only these guys are cool, right?
Yeah.
Good. So Consultant answer, it depends. But maybe going back to one of the answers. We have an innovation and planning sprint in here. So it's a kind of the last sprint in a program increment. So we have a cadence here, program increment, and we typically have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sprints. That can change. That's part of the customizing of the framework, what you do. But the last sprint is reserved for, basically it's a buffer, but we don't want to use that buffer. We do the next planning in there, we do inspect and adapt in there, but we also do innovation in there, hackathons, for example, making it interesting, do usability spikes. And what's also happening, we have a thing here which is called architectural runway. And this is basically filled by enablers, more building the basis for the implementation afterwards, which can be technical architectural stuff, but also user interface, user experience elements, which you are maybe implementing some stuff here to allow to build some features in the next program increment. So that's the second one. IP sprint, using the architectural runway and enablers to look a little bit ahead. And there is an additional element, there are a couple of more, but what I want to show is up there, you see a portfolio Kanban system, where we maybe have our largest, newest initiatives up there. And maybe we need to do some innovation spikes, so maybe we need to do some prototypes, pilots. And this is then, during the analysis phase, elements are given down here to the teams for the implementation. And UX teams, for example, can be a team here, can be part of a team, or can be a shared service, which was also an implementation I've seen. So it's really depending on the context, but it's basically happening as part of the daily delivery.
Okay,
Good.
I think that everything is clear right now. Thanks a lot,
more
Michael.
questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael. Okay.
Ну, я бы это назвала официальным закрытием конференции, ну ладно, Леша.
Это называется больше людей.
Ну что, дорогие участники, официальный день, день обучения, сегодняшний день подошел к концу. Хорошо, это был сложный день, но очень интересное воскресенье, которое вы потратили не зря, не на семью, дачу, грядку и что-нибудь еще, а на развитие себя, на развитие своей компании и своей команды. Перед тем, как мы окончательно...